Hi and welcome to another tutorial from Homs. Today we're looking at the rocket launch motion graphic tutorial, and I've got my rocket in front of me and the text I'm going to put in the rocket. So what we're going to do here is fitted typography, and fitted typography is essentially any typography that you're drawing or that you're hand lettering that you're trying to fit within an enclosed space. In our case it's the rocket. So what I would suggest to do first, this is not mandatory but I think it helps, is that you type out the word for spelling mistakes. Also you type out the word so that it's around the same shape as the object that you're fitting the text into, for spatial awareness and comprehension. Good. And once you've done that, what you're going to do next is draw two lines in Inkscape. We have one for the first character and a second line for the last character. So we have the spaces for the first line and last character set. Once you have that, they make sure they're curved to the curvature of the rocket. In our case, right, if you're doing a curved object and you want that effect, I do, so I have it. You want to combine them with Control and K, or you can go to Path and Combine. And once you combine them, then we're going to go into the Path Editor and we're going to search for interpolated subpaths. So Path Editor you can access with Control Shift and 7, and you're going to enter in interpolated subpaths, and then what that would do will create equidistant lines in between in accordance with the number that we enter. So you want to enter in a number that's one less than the amount of characters that we want fitted in the shape. So we have 6 characters in launch, we want 5 equidistant lines, and that will give us 6 spaces. So we have them here. Right, so you may not adhere strictly to these lines, but I think it's an excellent framework and a good starting point, right, for you to draw out the characters for them to look pleasing within the enclosed shape. Okay, so we're in Blender 4.0 and we've imported all of our assets. We've got the rocket here that we saw in the last step. We have the fire, which you didn't see, which is a simple fire here, and we have our background, and we have a in our background we have 2 elements. We have the image texture on top, which is the pattern, and then we have the flat background on the bottom there, and we have our smoke. We have our red smoke, our azure blue smoke, and our cobalt blue smoke at the bottom. Good. We're not going to use the smoke for the actual composition, but it's there to kind of guide us to show us what we want that smoke to move like, right? But in this step there's not much in the layout because majority of the assets will be created in the following steps in Blender, so we don't have much collections to talk about. In fact, we only have one, which is the rocket itself, and we have the rocket right here, and the flame will be going in that same collection. We have our azure smoke here. I've just lowered the red smoke and the cobalt smoke, so we just have the azure smoke showing. And if we look at this smoke, we can see that the smoke is moving in a curve from the start of the exhaust to its end point, to the left of the screen, and it is following a sort of U contour. So we're going to create a path that follows this same contour, right, because we want the clouds to move along that same path. So I'm going to hit Shift and A to add a path. You can use a Bezier curve, but the path works just the same. And then we're going to just move the handles down and create a curve that follows the same curvature that we're seeing here with our clouds, starting from this first bulb here. It's the first cloud protrusion. Good. It's below our cloud, so we're just going to just hit G and Z to move it up. Good. And then we're going to just have the curve loop on itself, because we want the clouds to follow a natural path and come back to the beginning of the exhaust. Good. I'm going to select this last 2, press F to complete the curve. Good. And I think this looks okay for now. Yeah, this looks alright. So what we're going to do next is that we're going to create the cloud bulb that's going to go on this path. So for that we're just going to create a circle. I'm going to click mesh and go to circle. Now if your computer can't manage the vertices, because I'm going to have a lot of these circles, then I advise using a lower vertices count. As for me, I use 64, but for now, just for this tutorial, we're going to use 32 just for that case. And we're going to press G and Z to bring it up. So essentially what we want to do now is to create a constraint that constrains the movement of this circle to the curve, right? Or to follow this curve. And for that, we're going to use a follow path. So go to the constraint options, that's this pulley down here. And I'm going to look for follow path. Now follow path, is for it to work, is going to require that we enter in the path target with the dropper tool, right? Or we can go into a list. But first, let's name our path. We're going to call our path left Azure smoke path control. Alright, it's a bit long, but it explains what happens because we're going to have a left side and a right side. This is just the left side and it's for the Azure smoke. So we're going to apply this to the red clouds and the blue clouds as well, the blue cobalt. So have to name them. Good. And with the control, and if we're going to go ahead and just go back and select this curve, right? We see it moves down a bit. Just have to press G and just move it back to where we want it to go. And just to make sure it's in the right place, moving in the right direction and stuff, we're going to take a look at how it's moving. As we pull the offset, right, that will give us an indication and show us if the curve direction is correct and if the circle is indeed moving how we want to across the curve. And I think it is for the most part. Good. If it's moving in the wrong direction, you just select this curve, press tab, then go to segments and go to switch direction, and that will put it in the correct direction. Cool. So we have our offset and we have our curve here. We're just going to add a material. I've used this gradient material. Let's go ahead into shading and show you. And if I go into shading material, this is the gradient material I've used. Good. And it's a shift from a darker blue to a lighter azure blue. And we're using a diffuse shader, right, because we want light to affect this. Good. And it goes into the material output. So if you want the direct composition of the gradient, you can see it here. Right, the emission shader not necessary. Good. So we're just going to link to this material that I've created. Cool. And then we're going to go back to layout. And we're going to go ahead and animate this path. So we're going to go to the curve. Good. And with the curve selected, we're going to go to the curve options here. Go to path animation. We're going to enter in a keyframe for the evolution time. And we're going to go to 100, enter in another keyframe. So we're going to enter it by 100 and have it play. Okay, we see that even though the offset showed us that it was moving in the right direction, it's moving in the opposite direction here. So here we can switch the direction, and it should work just fine here now. Awesome. See, it goes around entirely. Good, but we want this to move to be a linear interpolation. Right now it's Bezier. It starts off slow, speeds up in the middle, and then slows down at the end. But we don't want that. We want it to be a constant speed. So for that, we're going to have to select the path, go to the graph editor, and then we're going to select the operation that's being animated. You want to select then the interpolation, which is linear, and we get this linear. So if we play it now, you see there's no start up or slow down. It moves at a constant speed throughout the animation, and we want this to move continuously, right? So what we're going to do next is that we're going to go to channel, and we're going to add an extrapolation mode, and that mode is going to be linear extrapolation. Good. And that will just have the circle move in a constant cycle for basically as long as the timeline permits. Cool. So the next part of this is that we're going to add multiple circles to this curve, right? So to do that, just move this up a bit. So to do that, all we have to do is just duplicate the circle, go to the constraints, and add an offset. Good. And we can see here that it follows the curvature just fine. Good, so we're going to do this multiple times, and what we can do is that as we move the offset, we can change the size of them so that it doesn't look quite as uniform. Good, and we're going to do that right across the curve, right? So when once you do that, you'll get something that looks like this one here. Cool, and we can see that this creates this cloud effect. Okay, so moving on to the driver control part of this tutorial. We've added the clouds on both sides and they're animated. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to add a driver constraint to control the scale. So if you look at the animation of the circle that we have selected here and follow its progression through the animation, you'll see something, right? We'll see that the circle scales up as it moves closer to the further away from the rocket, but as it moves closer to the rocket, it scales down. Right, so we're going to create a driver that uses the proximity away from the rocket to scale the size of the cloud bulb. Cool, so to do this, what we're going to do, we're just going to delete the driver here. And let's right click and just delete drivers. And once we do that, the next part of it is that we're going to add a driver to a single channel for the scale vector. And it's okay, we just need to add it to one. We don't need to add it to all of them at the same time because we can copy and paste the driver. So let's add a driver. Let's go to show in drivers editor. Let's select the X scale and let's change a couple of properties here. So we're not going to be using the transform property here, so we're going to change this type to a distance, and that's proximity basically. And then we're going to look at the two objects that are defining the proximity. So we have to enter the first and the second object that's defining the distance. So the first object is the circle itself. So we're going to select this circle, we're going to press F2, we're going to copy the name of the circle, and then we're just going to go ahead and paste this. Boom. Good. And for the second object, I've created a cube, right, that we're going to link it to. And that cube, we could have made it the rocket, but I prefer the cube here. If we open up our controllers here and just show the cube, we can see it here. And we're going to make the object this cube. So what we're going to do here is just select the cube, press F2, copy the name, select back the circle, and just paste the name here. Good. So we see a change in the circle itself. We can see that it's scaling and it gets larger as it moves away from the cube and gets smaller as it moves towards the cube. But we can see that the scale is a bit too large, right? So we want to reduce the scale effect of the proximity cube. And to do that, we can multiply the variable in the expression by a decimal value. So we're going to use 0.5. And what this is going to do is that this is going to reduce the influence of the scale proximity. And you can see here, it looks a lot more like how we want it to look here. Good, so now that we have the desired driver, we're just going to copy it to the other channels. Let me just X this out, copy this, and paste it for the Y and Z channels. And we have our scale. Good. Now you would really do this before you would copy and paste all the circles. But I've done this way because it's better for the tutorial. So moving on to the wave modifier now, and we have in front of us some changes. Let's take a look at them. So the first change is with the clouds here. We've added the same animation properties that we added in the last steps to the red and cobalt clouds. We put the red behind the azure in the Z stack, and we put the blue cobalt in front in accordance to how our thumbnail looks, our initial design looks. And if we play it, we can see that it's animating nicely. It looks really good. We've used larger circles for the clouds at the back, and we've used about the same size circles for the clouds in the front. Good, and all of them have their control paths. We've also added some ambient occlusion to the diffuse materials here, and what that does is create this beautiful drop shadow that we see here in front of the clouds that separate them. Makes it look really nice. And you can do that by going to render and ticking ambient occlusion and making sure that the normals balance approximation is off as well. Also, you want to make sure that the world is white. So by that, we go to the world material, that's here, and you want to make sure that the background color is set to white. If it's set to anything else, which is the default gray, you'll get a sort of ugly gray color. So you want to default it to white to get the truest representation of the colors that you want. Cool. So with that now, the next thing that we've changed is also we've added an animation to the rocket and the fire. It's just simply an up and down motion for the rocket. So we're just translating along the y-axis, and for the fire, it's a scale along the y-axis. So it just scales up and down. I've not phased the two of them together, so they're out of sync, and I think that's okay because that helps with the organicness of the rocket movement. Cool. So we have that, and now we can move into the wave modifier. Good. So let's take a look at this, which is essentially just a triangle that's been subdivided, and let's check what the modifier looks like. These are the values that I used, right? I think they're good values for this result. You may play about with the values to get what you want, and yeah. So we've got the speed here. I think the speed is perhaps the most important part here, and you play with the rest of them, but you want to reduce the speed so it matches the movement. And the same goes for the bulbs of the circles. Only some of them have wave modifiers. And notice this one doesn't have it, but this one does. Alright, and we use pretty much the default values here, but just reduce the speed. Maybe we play about with the height a bit depending on what we're seeing, but essentially it's just the speed and that you want to really look at. Cool. And once you apply that to the circles, right, so you're going to look and see which ones are out of sync, you'll get something more organic. And that makes for the wave modifier part of this tutorial. So we're going to move on to the light rotation, and from that we're going to go on into the line art modifier. Okay, onto the light rotation. So the first thing I did here is add a light to the fire, and basically I just parented it to the fire. And parented the fire to the rocket. So as the rocket moves up and down, so does the fire, and so does the light. And the light just adds a bit of luminescence to the initial part of the initial part of the exhaust. Makes it look like it's hot and that there's actually a radiation there. And I said that about this height was good for me. Cool. And then we added the light rotation in the back. That's this section that you see here, which is essentially just an empty with some repeated strokes. Cool. That have this gradient set to it. I won't go over this gradient texture here because we covered this in the grain balloon tutorial. So if you want to see this gradient setup, you can go to the grain balloon tutorial to see that. But we're not going to go over it. But this is how the setup looks if you want to replicate it. And essentially we just duplicated the gradient, put it in the center, and then change the color ramp so that we've got this effect here. Right, what I will go through though is how we've made it into a circle here. So essentially what you want to do is create your plane and you want to just scale it in a bit. Scale Y, select everything and press SY. Good, and just scale in the whole object. Cool. Yeah, I think this looks about right. So you get about something that looks like this. And then what you want to do is select the bottom two vertices, and you want to hit Shift and S. And then from Shift and S, you want to go to cursor to selected. And that's going to put the cursor in the center of these two selected points. Then you're going to change the origin, so you're going to go to object, set origin to 3D cursor. Good, and then that will set origin in the exact point that you want for rotation. And you're going to do the same for the centerpiece here, so you're going to duplicate the centerpiece here and just scale it in on both sides. SX and just scale it in, and then parent it to bring it out on the Z a bit and parent it to the one below it, and then you add the gradient and you just rotate and duplicate, and that will give you the rotation of the that will give you essentially the light rotation. You parent all of those to an empty, and then you pretty much just rotate the empty. Cool, and that's the light rotation. Okay, so we're moving on to the final part of this tutorial, the line art modifier. Cool, so if we just play this, we can see the line art modifier when it plays. It does come at the cost of a performance hit, so you want to keep that in mind. If you look to the top left, you can see my frames per second is below average, and we're using 30 frames per second just for reference. And we can see the line modifier basically draws a line, interprets the way where a line would go, based on the object or collection of objects that we offer it to find the line for. Cool. So what you'll see also is that as we do the line modifier, you'll see sections like this where the line modifier will try to compensate for gaps in the circle. So you want to adjust the offset in the path follow constraint, or you want to move it, translate it yourself, or you want to scale it yourself. You can use delta scale to adjust the scale of the clouds itself, you know, because you've got a driver on the clouds. So if you want to adjust it, you can use delta, and that can help to fill up the space, right? And you're gonna play about with it until you get the cloud result that you're looking for. But first, let's go ahead and just add the line modifier here. So I'm just gonna delete it here quickly and add a new one. We're gonna go and create a blank grease pencil object. Good. We're gonna go to the modifiers tab, add the line art modifier, and then we're gonna add a bit of parameters here for the collection. We're gonna have the collection where we have all of the clouds, so you want the exhaust and you want the clouds in the same collection. Good, for both left and right. So for me, I have it in blue smoke left. We're going to select the layer in grease pencil. That's going to be the layer that the stroke is placed on, and then we're going to select the stroke itself material. Right, so you're going to see it. It's going to draw in some lines, and what it's doing now is drawing lines around all of the circles separately, but we don't want that, so we can change some parameters to get the effect we're looking for. Firstly, we don't want contour, we want silhouette. And then what we want to do next is to remove the intersections, and here we are, we have our line art modifier. Good, and we have our outline. So what we want to do here now is just increase the thickness. For me, I use 77. And you want to change the color, right, from the black to blue. So you can go to materials and change it to a blue. Good, and just make it a lighter blue. By default, it comes with the lights checked on, so you want to go to your layer section and turn off the lights, and then go and increase the color of it so it looks similar to what we had before. And if we play it, you can see the line art modifier shows. Now it doesn't show exactly on the starting frame, so you want to go to your grease pencil object, go to dope sheet, set grease pencil, and you'll see here the keyframe for where it starts. Just move this to the beginning of the time frame, and you'll start from the beginning. And this concludes the rocket launch tutorial. If you enjoyed this tutorial, give it a thumbs up. If you have something that you think you could have done better, then let me know in the comments. And we appreciate your contribution, and it helps everybody. So until I see you again with another tutorial, get up and design a new dawn. Later.